Alright, the cell. So this is my fourth video on biology. Let's get into the cell, which is essentially, the basis of biology. I mean, when you think of biology, you'll think of a cell, the same way you'll think of an atom when you think of chemistry, or you'll think of, gravity when you think of physics. So what's a microbiome? A microbiome is something that influences our mood and diet. It allows you to digest cellulose and can protect you against cancer. So I guess those are descriptions, but not an entire definition. So a definition is they're just simply different types of collections of bacteria. So you have the dermal biome. I think you have an anthropogenic biome. So their dermal biome will be the skin biome. So they're just different collections of bacteria. And humans don't naturally make cellulase, but some gut bacteria ferment or break cellulose down into fatty acids, which can be used for triglycerides, which is why they allow you to digest cellulose. So that's quite logical. But I know people don't really know the definition of bacteria, they just say it a lot. So what is bacteria? And bacteria are just simply tiny single-celled organisms. They are alive, one cell, and are prokaryotes, which means that they have no nucleus or membrane-bound organelles. They do have ribosomes because prokaryotes, any type of cell has prokaryotes, which we'll get in, or it has ribosomes, which we'll get into in the next slide, I believe. So what is cell theory? So someone who doesn't know biology probably hasn't heard of Theodore Schwann, which is interesting because he discovered or he proposed the idea of cells. Um, so why is it that everyone knows? Um, I don't know. I just People never hear of Theodore Schwann, although he basically proposed the idea of cells back in 1839, and every organism is composed of one or more cells, which is pretty logical. And new cells only arise from other cells. The end part I just added on, which is essentially biogenesis, because it states that life can only come from life, like cells won't arise from other things. Um, won't arise from just non-living cells. So why are cells so small? So this is my favorite part of this lesson because it goes into mathematical geometry. Um, so my book doesn't explain this. So yeah. Um, well, how would I do so? Let's think of it logical. So we'll do a circle or a sphere. Yeah, sphere is, I guess, maybe the best one here. The surface area is equal to 4 pi r squared, and the volume is equal to, I guess the integral of that, which is 4/3 pi r cubed. So the derivative of volume is equal to the surface area, which is also interesting by itself, and that's because when h is so incredibly small, it's irrelevant. But that's for a math video. So what do we know here? Well, we know here that the greater r is, comma, or sorry, why did I say comma? The greater r is, the smaller the volume is. Or the greater the volume is. How do I say this? As r approaches infinity, comma, um, S of A becomes way, way smaller than the volume. Way. How would I emphasize way smaller? Probably 3 inequality signs. How would I prove this mathematically? Well, there's many ways I could prove it mathematically. I can probably use L'Hopital's rule and stuff like that. So I really love the intersection between math. But simply, we'll just stick to algebra methods or even things you've learned in pre-calc. Well, we'll just use kind of like convergence tests or divergence tests. And we'll do 4 pi r squared as the limit as r approaches infinity, which essentially means if the radius or if the size of the cell gets infinitely big, what happens? So we also need to note that a cell is not a perfect sphere, but I'm just going to do so according to this. I'm just going to assume that it is. Well, we can just cross out pi and 4, so we get r cubed over 3r squared. Well, all we have to do is take L'Hopital's rule of the bottom and top, So we get 6r. And we can even take L'Hopital's rule one more time to get 6r over 6, such that r is just approaching infinity. We could have probably just crossed out r squared to get r over 3. But yeah, it's approaching infinity, which means that as the cell gets bigger and bigger, the volume is going to exceed the surface area by so much. So that means that if a cell is this big, it's very, very possible that the surface area is greater than the volume, which means that if it has a bigger contact area, there are more ways for selective permeability to occur, which essentially just means that there are more ways that the cell can absorb proteins and other stuff through, I guess, phagocytosis or endocytosis. But essentially, if the cell needs to interact with the outside environment, the cell needs a greater surface area because the amount of power that it needs, I guess, has to be efficient, where that surface area is greater, not greater than the volume, but has to be at an efficient ratio. They actually call it the S to V ratio in biology. I mean, you can think of this logically, right? How would I explain this logically? Well, I guess there's calculus optimization, stuff like that. But logically, if I can't think of examples right now, I'm blanking, but the higher the volume is, or the higher the surface area to volume ratio, the higher it is, the more it's able to absorb things relative to its size. So like a large person needs I found a good example. Like a large person needs to consume a lot more food than a smaller person. That's based on metabolic rates. So a larger person needs to eat more. Well, a larger person also exerts more energy. So is there a ratio such that the amount of energy they need to consume, energy consumed, divided by energy they get, or energy they exert? Actually, that should probably be switched. The energy consumed versus the energy they exert is ideal. So for cells, the greater the surface area and smaller the volume is the most ideal thing because they can interact with their environment more if their surface is greater. So that's the logic there. It's kind of like why mammals are kept a certain size. I just added that in there because there's something interesting that, like you see dinosaurs and stuff, but dinosaurs are very unideal body types because the greater something is, the more strain it puts on their legs because they weigh more. So logically, they can only grow to a certain size before their bones would fall underneath them. So kind of the same logic there. Prokaryotic cells are 100 times smaller than eukaryotic cells. So the difference between prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells are that prokaryotic cells don't have membrane-bound organelles, and they don't have a nucleus. They do both have DNA, though, because a lot of people think DNA when they think of nucleus, or nucleus when they think of DNA. So what are the features for all cells? Well, we have the plasma and cell membrane. The plasma membrane is essentially just the outside cell for selective permeability, which is essentially the surface area that we kind of covered earlier. Ribosomes are what makes proteins. There's different types of ribosomes, but this is what we'll get to now, especially when we get to the systems, the endomembrane systems. So yeah, ribosomes make proteins, DNA, genetic information, and cytoplasm, which is just the jelly-like interior where cellular processes occur, or processes occur. So logical stuff there. So prokaryotic cells have no nucleus or organelles, only ribosomes which are not membrane-bound. The domains included here are bacteria and archaea. We don't get to eukarya later, but I think we do cover cilia, which is in the eukarya domain. So what are eukaryotic cells? Well, there's plants, animals, fungi, and protists. Yeah, protists are eukarya, I believe. Sorry, I was not talking about. I was mistaken cilia for protist earlier. But eukaryotic cells actually have organelles. So, as we mentioned before, there's only one organelle um, that there's only a few organelles um, that um, that prokaryotes have, but eukaryotes have membrane-bound organelles. So they have a cytoskeleton, which essentially maintains the shape of the cells and allows for the movement of organelles. They have the nucleus, which is the site that stores DNA, genetic information. Golgi apparatus, which is the site that assembles lipids and proteins. And they have the rough endoplasmic reticulum, which you'll hear a rough ER often, or smooth ER. And it's the site that synthesizes proteins. And the smooth ER is a site that synthesizes lipids and also allows for detoxification. So ribosomes create proteins, which is why both prokaryotes and eukaryotes have ribosomes. So the endomembrane system is four things, and these are the four things you'll need to know. Vesicles, which are made by Golgi to transport proteins like a delivery truck. And you'll hear this often, especially if you get to, or if you study neurology or neuroscience. They cover, like synaptic vesicles. So vesicles typically just mean something that transports something. So here, we have vesicles where it's made by the Golgi to transport proteins. Peroxisomes detoxify harmful molecules. Lysosomes contain digestive enzymes and serve as a water disposal. And vacuoles contain food particles. So eukaryotes and exocytosis. This is only in eukaryotic cells. Exocytosis is the movement of materials outside the membrane. And I'm sure if you know the difference between exo and endo, then endocytosis will come to you naturally, that it's the movement of materials inside the cell. Phagocytosis is the immense cell engulfment, which just means that it eats solid food particles. And penocytosis is the breakdown of molecules, which many people say it considers it cell drinking because it's small molecules that it's consuming. So this is the endosymbiotic theory. I believe this is what many scientists believe now. But organelles are just ancient bacteria. And remember, bacteria are just single-celled organisms. And they were taken in by early cells through phagocytosis. So cells would just come in and eat them up. And the cells that would eat them up were proto-eukaryotic, which means they weren't fully eukaryotic. Obviously, because they don't have the membrane-bound organelles. But they just came and they just ate the organelles, and now the organelles are part of our system now, and they divided and such. So that's all you'll need to know for chapter 4 of that. So